Well, good morning, hon, and this is the first time where I really can get away with saying it's nice to be back. It literally is the same place, and obviously while I'm here I can't really see this, but it's Shimizu, it's a small place, and we're fine. We're at the World Heritage Site for Mount Fuji, which is its own I won't say world wonder in its own right, but it is a impressive building. A little bit of garden that I can show you later on. I didn't know how close we were going to get to the mountain. It's not particularly close, but it is there somewhere. Now that I see it, can't find it in the viewfinder. The building's an interesting one where it's sort of not a spiral staircase, but just a spiral pathway that ascends for about 4 stories before you get to this observation platform where obviously you can see Mount Fuji, if not clearly. As you can see, it's obscured by a few clouds just below its summit. Yeah, at least you get a straight shot of it. There's quite a crowd here, as you can probably see, and maybe here as well. I'm never quite sure how the microphone works on this camera. But this is as close as I've gotten or ever will get to the mountain, I'm sure. And it's quite the view, of course. You can also see what our guide referred to as Mount Koi, or Hoi, I couldn't quite figure out, off to the right of the main summit. That is actually a wound effect of the last eruption in the 1700s, where it basically created a second mountain, although, you know, here it just looks like a bump on the side of the main mountain. This is what happens with volcanoes. They create new vents here and there, and the shape of the mountain will change in an instant. Anyone from northern Washington would know this from Mount St. Helens. Anyone from the Philippines and Indonesia would know this from countless volcanoes down there. So this should come as no surprise. And yet these things have stood here for hundreds of years without much change since then. I'm not sure whether Fuji is still considered active or just dormant, but it is not extinct. It can and will go off one day again.
You want to look cool?
And we just don't know. That's just the way it is with almost all these things. Everything is an unknown. Everything is transient. It's just that on our human scale, it seems like forever before the next time. And there's another sermon in that too, I'm sure. But I'm not the one to write it, thankfully. The pathway is filled with film clips depicting Fuji at its summit, and also the experience of climbing. Interestingly enough, one of the first parts of the exhibit is speaking of how the ancients would ascend Fuji as a form of worship, which kind of makes sense in an animist society. On a related note, that was literally the excuse given by the English explorers 100 years or so ago when they were trying to persuade the Tibetan Lamas to allow them to climb what the Tibetans referred to as Chomolungma and what we know today as Mount Everest. They basically told them that they were a curious race of foreign people who worshipped mountains, and in order to do so, tried to climb them. And somehow that actually worked, and they were given permission to climb. Though to be fair, that particular party didn't make it. So it is odd to think of explorers as worshippers of nature and what she produces, and realize that we haven't necessarily come very far since those millennia in the past. Indeed, there are those who probably would argue that we are returning to a wiser day, where we anthropomorphize Mother Earth and bow to what we think are her wishes, claiming that she is angry at what we have done to herself, as it were. And it could be argued that we're not the most responsible stewards of the planet we've been given. However, we were given a command to fill the earth and subdue it, and until God comes down and says, okay, yes, you've managed that one command out of everything else I've told you to do, you can stop doing this one yet. I'm not sure that we need to be reversing course necessarily. But to be fair, that's just my opinion, and anyone else can take it for whatever they think it's worth, which is to say not much. The thing is, you can still see Fuji today, and the cloud cover is cloud cover, not smoke or smog or something as awful as that. We have done worse, we have cleaned up our act, and the question is how much of what happens is our own doing even. A single volcanic eruption, in fact, can throw out enough pollution to obliterate any of our hard work. But hey, I'm not enough of a scientist to argue this particular position. It's just that I have my doubts, my skepticism, and I'm gonna voice that. People are free to disagree with me. People are free to agree with me. There's not much I can do about that. But in the meantime, I see no reason to not enjoy and to not use what we've been given and find out what we can make of it. We can make the world a more beautiful place, even if it is nothing like nature. We can tame the water to meet our needs, to use as transport, to use as energy, to use for life itself. It's there for us. We would be fools not to take advantage of it. Likewise, the world was not made necessarily for utility. It was made as much for beauty as anything else. And the more of us that appreciate it and get the chance to appreciate it, I think the better off we all are.